A spokesperson for the NRA went on Fox News and got a surprisingly hostile interview from Chris Wallace. Let's take a look at this and then we'll discuss.
Is a 72-hour limit on background checks. And as a result, some people call that the Charleston loophole because Dylann Roof, the man who bought a gun, through a background check, and then killed 9 people in a church, you see in his picture there, he got the gun because his background check wasn't complete in 72 hours, even though he would have failed that background check. Question for you, Mr. Cox. When it's a matter of life and death, and I understand you don't want background checks to go on forever. That's not appropriate. But when it's a matter of life and death, couldn't it be 4 days or 5 days and not 3 days and he gets his gun?
Sure. The National Rifle Association has worked to include every mental health record, every court adjudication, every criminal record to make sure that people don't fall through the cracks. The National Rifle Association...
That's not true, sir.
That's absolutely true,
No,
Chris.
it isn't. Forgive me. In February, President Trump signed a measure that said that the Social Security Administration no longer has to provide information on mental disorders to the National Background Criminal Check, and the NRA supported that.
That is a complete misrepresentation of our position, complete misrepresentation of what President Trump did. What he said is you can't arbitrarily deny a senior citizen their Second Amendment rights based on no finding of dangerousness. The only finding was that they asked somebody to help them manage their financial affairs. If you think that somebody needing help with a checkbook should eliminate them from exercising their Second Amendment, then you fundamentally disagree
mental
with the
disorders. And mental disorders, now I agree, it wasn't everybody, it was some people with mental disorders, and you backed that.
Their definition of a mental disorder was someone who asked for help handling their finances. That is not a prohibited category, Chris, and it shouldn't be a prohibited category.
That was awesome. I don't know if I've ever seen a quicker 180 than that. So, first of all, I didn't know that about Dylann Roof. The fact that he went to go buy the guns, there was a cap on the waiting period. They didn't get the information within that waiting period, so they sold the gun to him anyway. And so Chris Wallace is like, hey, man, why not just make it so that 4 days or 5 days instead of 3 days in terms of so that they can get the information so they can know whether or not to sell the gun to this guy because he would have failed the background check. I don't know how anybody could argue against that. And like I said, I was ignorant on that. I didn't know that that was the case with Dylann Roof. But that does go to show you sometimes there are some of these mass shootings where you literally cannot point to a single gun regulation that would have prevented the shooting. But the point I always make is, yes, that's true, but if you do certain gun regulation, like a universal background check and ban on high-capacity magazines or what have you, that drops the statistics down. So in other words, yes, we might not be able to say anecdotally, in this specific instance, it would have saved lives if we had this regulation. But you can say is, if you had universal background checks, if you had a ban on high-capacity magazines, and you go down the list, well then yes, the macro statistics would drop. So you wouldn't get 33,000 gun deaths a year. You wouldn't get the 11,000 homicides. You would cut that number drastically. So that's the point I always made. But actually, it also turns out that in some of these cases, yes, you could have prevented it with specific gun regulations. I think, what was it, the Virginia Tech one? There's another one where there was a very simple gun regulation that would have stopped it. I'm not sure if it was getting rid of the gun show loophole. It might have been getting rid of the gun show loophole. But whatever it was, there was a very specific, no, this regulation would have stopped that shooting. And remember, you're not going to stop every criminal from getting their hand on the gun, but what you will do is drop the macro statistics. So if you deter some of these criminals from doing it, then yes, you're going to have a drop in the number of mass shootings and the number of gun homicides and gun deaths. But I didn't know that about Dylann Roof, and that was fascinating to hear. But the 180 that guy did was something else, because he goes, Chris, that's not true. The NRA has worked to get, make sure all these records are taken into account, make sure you get every mental health record on the books here. And Chris Wallace was like, no, you didn't. In fact, Donald Trump just signed an executive order that said the Obama rule that if you're a senior citizen and you're too out of your head to handle your own finances, you're also too out of your head to get a gun. That rule Trump got rid of. So the rule is literally, hey, some people on Social Security are too far gone mentally to handle their checkbook, handle their finances. That they need somebody appointed to help them with their fucking finances. The rule said, hey, if you can't handle your money, you definitely can't handle a gun. Which, yeah, I fucking think so, don't you? You're too far gone that you can't handle your money, but sure, give the guy a fucking 22. What? That's the position of the NRA. But what's amazing is they said, Chris, we work to get every mental health record there weighed into account. Well, to the extent you did, you weighed it so that you can then allow them to get a gun. So that's not true. You're not like, oh yeah, no, we want these strict rules and requirements for background checks. No, what you're saying is if they are too far gone to handle their money, we do want them to get a gun. So sure, we want that person to pass the background check. So that's the kind of slimy bullshit you would expect from the NRA. What do you mean us? No, we care deeply about gun safety and we care about getting all that stuff in the background check so that you can then pass them. So that you can then sell them the gun after that's in the background check. Jeez, man. The other day they came out and they said, bump stocks, sure. We're in favor of regulating bump stocks. Bump stocks turn a semi-automatic weapon into an automatic weapon, fully automatic weapon. And my point in discussing that was, look, if you buy into that argument, that, hey, maybe we should regulate that, well, then you just undermined every argument you make after every other mass shooting. Because after every other mass shooting, what do they say? The only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. You know, if you pass a gun law, only the good guys are going to listen to the law and the criminals are going to break it anyway, so why have the laws in the first place? We need to make sure that the good guys have all the opportunities to have the same weapons that the bad guys have so you can counter the bad guys. Well, every one of those arguments is just undermined by saying, hey, maybe we should regulate bump stocks. Because you're saying, sure, there's some regulation we could do. There's a line somewhere. Well, if you're admitting there's a line somewhere, then the entire debate we're having is where does it make sense to draw the line? But you speak out of one side of your mouth and say, no, there is no line and we shouldn't even have that debate because it's an illegitimate debate. But then out of the other side of your mouth, you say, well, sure, there's a line and that line is bump stocks. Let's do bump stocks. So then why would it be beyond the realm of discussion? Why is it unreasonable to say, hey, maybe we should ban high-capacity magazines? You've already admitted there's a line. Why not stop there? So now they're just contradicting themselves too. At least before they were consistent in their insanity, now they're contradicting themselves as well. And on top of just doing misleading arguments like, yeah, no, we care about the background check, for sure. But something about, we want to pass them if they have these giant mental health issues and they can't handle their finances. Well, then the background check is moot then, isn't it? Because you want to have the background check and then pass them no matter what. That's ridiculous.